let's go, let's go, let's go. I heard that we here in the Union Square, let's go. I heard that we here in the Howard Square, let's go. I heard that we here in the Times Square, let's go, let's go, let's go.
I am your host, Maximilian Hill, and today we have a very special guest. Bronson Lingamfelter is the co-founder and chief operating officer at One Earth Rising, a video game startup that is revolutionizing the video game industry. Bronson is a graduate of Brown University, where he is in the Athletic Hall of Fame for wrestling, and he's also a graduate of Columbia Business School. Bronson, thank you for coming on the Built in the Bronx podcast. How are you today?
I am great, and my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful, wonderful. So exciting things happening at One Earth Rising. So why don't you tell us a little bit about One Earth Rising and the work that you're doing there?
Yeah, absolutely. So our underlying belief, philosophy, what we're trying to change is we're trying to bring ownership back to the video game industry. Back in the day, when you bought a game, you owned it, you had a cartridge, if you were done with it, you could give it to a friend, you could trade it, you could resell it, get a couple bucks. And we've lost that completely with the move to digital, with the digital progression. We've lost ownership of everything. The venture capital model likes rental models and annuities, so we really don't control anything anymore. And with the technology that's come out, what we discovered is that we can reintroduce ownership, but we can do it in a really cool and new digital way, whereas it's not the game, but you can actually own the characters. And that's the whole movement behind Web3 gaming. Specifically at One Earth Rising, we looked at the industry and said, this is really cool that you can own and trade your characters, but what are you really trading? And the status quo is that, and it's very, very cool what you can do with blockchain. You can create immutable ownership. So like your digital object, you can trade like you would a physical object, and that ownership. So I can have a copy of a movie and I can give it to you, Maximilian, and then I don't have it in it anymore. That is a radical change of what has been possible digitally. But when we looked at it, it was really just a receipt of ownership. And we said, let's make it so the entire video game character can be exchanged. So I can play with a character, I can level it up, I can sell it, I can trade it, I can give it to somebody else, and I can bring it into different games. Now, that's a lot, and there's a lot of work to be done towards that reality, but that's what we're setting out and starting to actually do.
Very exciting. So I think I looked at your LinkedIn profile. It says that you're a top voice on LinkedIn for Web3. So yep. Two questions, because our audience here is our students at Lehman College. One, please talk about the importance of LinkedIn and how it has maybe helped your career, maybe either find opportunities for, to do business with people, maybe for jobs for yourself, or, clients for your business. And maybe tell us a little bit about Web3, right? What does the general public not understand about Web3? Because it is a nascent industry that I would say most people don't really understand. And we're going to be starting to look to experts like you to kind of, clear the fog.
Yeah, for sure. The short answer of what most people don't understand about Web3 is everything. Yeah. And I'm immersed in the world. I talk to people who are living it and breathing it. And then I go on vacation and talk to people who I'm not working with. And I realize I even, a couple of months ago, my mother-in-law asked me what I do. And I've been at it for 3 years. And I gave her like my elevator pitch that I would for a VC. I attempted to make it approachable. And she looked at me, she's like, I don't know what any of those words mean. And that was a sort of wake up call. And that's actually part of what led to my top Web3 voice is I realized I needed to start talking about it and explaining it. So the easiest way, and it's very complicated, but the easiest way I find to explain it is to explain the progression of how we've gotten here. Web 1, think the 90s. Think that basically, and I realize most of your students weren't alive or certainly weren't interacting with technology in the way in the 90s. But it was, we called it brochureware. Companies would like take a picture of menu and put it online. It was companies speaking to consumers.
So I noticed on your LinkedIn profile that you are actually a LinkedIn top voice for Web3, which, let's face it, is a nascent industry that most people don't really understand. So two questions. First question is, what is something that most people get wrong about Web3? Because I think, most people don't understand it. And two, please talk about how LinkedIn has benefited your career, either through opportunities, clients that maybe you've gotten, or people that you've networked with. Because I know we're trying to emphasize the importance of LinkedIn to our students.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right, it is a nascent industry and people really don't know what it means. I live in it, I breathe in it, I talk to people all the time, and I get sort of tunnel vision. And then I do something like go on vacation and talk to the rest of the world and realize nobody knows what it is. Funny enough, a couple months ago, my mother-in-law asked me what I did 3 years into this career, and I told her, and she said, I don't know what any of those words mean. And that's actually part of what led to my top voice on LinkedIn badge, is because I realized I needed to start talking about it and explaining it to everyone. So to think about, to understand Web3, and it's super complicated, especially when you talk about the underlying technology, which I'm not going to claim to understand how it works. I'm a business guy. I just know what it can do. Think about it from where we've come. So possibly before your students have been born, in fact, I think probably, we had Web 1.0. It was the 90s, it was brochureware, it was really expensive to create a website. And so you had corporations speaking to consumers online, pretty nascent. Then from that, Amazon was born, e-commerce. Web 2 was when the technological innovation had gotten to the point where it was cost effective for consumers to broadcast. And so all of a sudden, everybody got a voice. It was no longer oppressively expensive and difficult to have a website or talk online, and you started having social media pop up. And that is sort of the social environment. The social web is really what Web 2.0 is. What happened with that is it became really cheap and easy for you and I to communicate on LinkedIn, for example. But all of that value of our communications accrued to those corporations. Web 3 is breaking that, and it's basically enabling consumers to own their works online in a new way. The fundamental difference is the way you think about owning something in the physical world, where I have my phone, it's mine. There are many like it, but this one is mine. If I want to sell it or trade it, I can sell it to you, and then I don't have it anymore. Digital information has not been that way. I could have a picture of this and I could copy it and send you a copy, but then I have a copy. The difference of what Web3 does is makes it so that that copy can be unique and I can sell that copy to you, which unlocks a lot of business opportunity and a lot of opportunity effectively for consumers to regain control of their information.
Very cool.
And that's what we're doing basically in the video game space. Yeah. In terms of LinkedIn, technology is incredible. I mean, LinkedIn is technology fundamentally, but relationships are what separate us from AI machines, and one of many things. And without a doubt, the best way to find a job, to find an investor, is to have sincere relationships and expand your network. And LinkedIn is the place to do it. I mean, if you want to talk images and pictures, Instagram is great. But if you want to talk professionally, that is what LinkedIn is for. And it's certainly more focused towards business people. I know a lot of your audience is on the tech side. But I always tell people, if you're a tech person looking to break in, go to a business meetup. because you're unique there. And if you're a salesperson and you want to find your next job, don't go to the sales meetup. Go to the CS meetup where they need salespeople.
Yeah. That's actually a great point. I think it was Peter Thiel, the one of the founder Palantir, member of the PayPal mafia. I read his book. What was his Zero to One? Zero to One.
Oh yeah, yep.
And it was a book about startups and business. And I think there's a chapter about how he says, a lot of tech people don't like salespeople, right? All they want to do is just build the next meta, right? But the reality, and this is what he says in the chapter, is that there's no, other than the internet and smartphones, there are no products or services that sell themselves, right? Every product needs salespeople. And he writes a long chapter about why people hate salespeople, and I think really interesting guy, because he has, a tech background. So, but yeah, that's funny that you mentioned that, because I agree with you. You don't want to surround yourself with people who always think and do the same things you do. It's, diversity of thought and background is really important. One thing that I've found in my personal network, some of the most successful people that I know were champion wrestlers in high school and college. And you are in the Brown University Hall of Fame, Athletic Hall of Fame for wrestling. Tell me a little bit about what you learned, throughout your time as a wrestler.
Yeah, so it's funny that you say that, because I think we sort of feel like we have a reputation of being like sort of these like thuggish underlings, and just because it's a combative sport, but it's a beautiful sport. I think what I took with me from it, and what you're zeroing in on, is wrestling is a sport that is extremely difficult. I frequently have people say, "Oh, I tried that and I lasted a week." So you have to be a little, I don't know what the right word is, but willing to suffer pain in order to succeed. And I don't mean like injuries, I mean just physical endurance pain. And I think that if anybody who's been successful in that sport has pushed through a lot of physical pain, and it's different in business and in life, but the type of pain, but it's that willingness to work hard and stay up late. I think that's a part of it. And I think the other is, I love team sports, and wrestling is to a certain extent a team sport, but you also have to be accountable. Everybody knows what happened, and if you lost, it was your fault.
Yeah, so that's the thing about it. Is a team sport, but not really, because when it's happening, it's just you and the other guy, and you either know when you look in the mirror whether you put in the maximum effort that you could or you didn't. And if you did and you still lost, then there's really nothing, to be ashamed of, because you just lost to someone who was better that day. But it's, I played team sports, lacrosse, football. Whenever there's a loss, there's always a lot of blame to go around, right? But in singular pursuits like golf, boxing, or wrestling, there's really no one else you can blame. Maybe you could blame the coach, but usually, especially if you're at a professional level, you hired the coach, so then it comes back on you. It's the ultimate in accountability. There's nowhere to run. That's why I love this singular sports. If you could have a billboard that was overlooking the Cross Bronx Expressway, and it could say anything, 10 words or less, what would it say, and why?
Yeah, so it would say something like, be kind, be creative, be empathetic, and challenge everything you hear. And the reason is, I think what's most important, particularly in this increasingly polarized world, is we need to reverse that. And especially with what's going on politically right now, and I'm certainly not going to jump into politics, but it feels like a matchstick away from from exploding.
Yeah.
So people need to realize that we're much more similar than different. So that's part one. But part two of that, challenge everything you hear. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and it's only going to get worse. And it's only going to, the mechanisms that people that society have been able to rely on for trust and accountability are changing, are going to completely change. And we aren't going to be able to trust based on what we've grown up trusting. And what I mean by that, so when I grew up, there was a phrase, a picture doesn't lie. How funny is that now when you think about that? And that was actually like photographic evidence was considered proof because you couldn't doctor it. Now it's super easy to doctor.
It is very easy to doctor it. And I don't know why, but it comes Kate Middleton, who's married to the print, right?
Yeah.
I think she like doctored a photo, and like I forgot what the reason was, but it wasn't even like she was benefiting from it or anything. But the backlash that she got from it was like significant and severe. And I don't know why, but you're right. It's like with AI, and we can talk about AI next. You know, I see some of these photos and or videos online created by AI, and it looks like a legitimate human. Or, I mean, I'm a huge aviation fanatic, right? And I follow a lot of aviation accounts on Instagram. And there's this one account, they just create like flight simulations, right? And it looks like the real thing. And then you look a little closer, and you're like, no, this is fake. But it is pretty scary. So tell us.
It's to the point where I have set a secret password with my mother because, and I've had to explain to her, people try and scam her. I mean, she's of the profile where scammers reach out. And I've told her, like, you can't trust my voice anymore because somebody can call and sound like me. And Mom, I'm not going to call and ask you for money, one, and I'm not going to buy something on an Amazon that is getting revoked if you don't give them your credit card number. So one, never do that. But let's talk about trust. And so we have a password so that if she ever questions what something coming from my voice, she can validate if it's really me.
This is a great idea. Great idea. Because I'm a podcast host. We don't have millions of listeners, right? But my voice is out there. And it's actually happened to a former boss of mine. Someone cloned her son's voice, said that he was in jail and sent money. And she did, and it's, these cyber criminals they're vicious. And you think back 20 years ago, 10 years ago, digital security was not even a thing, right? And now it's this massive industry. So, interesting times. But yeah, I think another question for you. If you were to give any advice for computer science students who are at schools that are non-target schools, and by non-target, I mean schools that tech companies and the big companies typically don't recruit from, what advice would you give them to kind of break in to the industry? Because a lot of our students are really bright, they are ambitious, but they don't have those inbuilt professional relationships that certain kids do at some of the, the more prestigious, more expensive schools, more well-known schools. So what advice would you give to people who are trying to, I guess, break into the tech industry through the side door?
Yeah. So love the question. And I think it's wonderful that we're talking about tech students, because as a student, you can create a body of work, you can demonstrate what you've learned, you can demonstrate skills. And in some of the other professions, I think that it's not as clear. So, I mean, one, network, I know that's easier said than done, but people are, in my experience, people are more willing to talk to students. So start now while you're a student. and learn publicly. You've had a great opportunity to learn academically, but particularly as you, this is 4 years or maybe 6 if you have pursued extra education. That's the first 6 years of your not pseudo-professional life. You need to learn for the rest of your career too, especially if you're going into an industry like blockchain, AI, Web3, where it is changing so rapidly that the only way to really know what's going on is to be actively learning and helping to drive that forward and learn publicly. Specifically, I will speak to the blockchain world. It is unbelievably collaborative. So if you just jump in and start doing stuff and talking to people, it's unlike anything I've seen in any industry I've seen in terms of willingness to collaborate. I helped digitize the comic industry, and you want to talk about anti-collaborative. Marvel and DC would run stunts to get retailers to pull their the other one's comics off their shelves. But in this nascent growing world, people are really collaborative and everybody's learning, and as long as you're willing to learn, understand that you will be wrong, also understand that other people will be wrong. And so you need to be looking for the right or a better answer, and not sort of debating to win, which I think is part of what's wrong with a lot of things these days.
Yeah, you mentioned, networking is tough, and I agree. I mean, when I started out, I thought my work was good enough to speak for itself, and it's not really true unless you're Elon Musk. And I learned that the hard way, because when I got laid off, I hadn't really built up my network. It's hard when you're working for a company, because usually when you're working at a company, your network is within that company, right? And then you get laid off or you leave, it's, all bets are off. But when I look back, when I was starting out, I wasn't a really strong networker, and I learned it because I had to. What I tell the students is, start a podcast, right? It's the ultimate way to meet people, because you're offering something of value to the other person. That's how I met you at a tech event.
Yep.
I just saw you speak and I reached out, and, I reach out to a lot of people. I'll send invitations to come on a podcast, and you get a lot of rejection, but it doesn't matter. If you could get 50 guests in a year, right? That's 50 podcasts, and you put it publicly, and it's, I think they said something like only 1 to 2% of people on LinkedIn actually post regularly, right? So it's a great way to market yourself, and I think it's a lot of our students, podcasting, especially if you're going to do it publicly, involves public speaking, right? Opening yourself to judgment, right? And I think it's a big fear of most people, especially young people. But, it's one of the many tools that I've found. But yeah, I think.
I mean, I faced that anxiety when I started speaking more aggressively on LinkedIn. It's like, it's especially when you start. I think everybody, I assume everybody must feel that awkwardness. I guess some people don't, but it's just, no, it's natural. And yeah, you gotta.
If any of our students wanted to get in touch with you to learn more about One Earth Rising, or maybe to connect with you so they can start building out their professional networks, what would be the best way to get in touch with you?
Well, since we're encouraging them to network more and use the right tools, I would definitely say reach out to me on LinkedIn. Say that you're at Lincoln College and you saw the podcast, and I will absolutely accept your invitation and try and help.
Very cool. Very cool. Anything else you want to promote, Bronson?
I'll go back to the be kind and be empathetic.
Very good. I love it. Bronson, thank you so much for coming on the Built in the Bronx podcast. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.